We appreciate all of the guests who have appeared on our show and sincerely thank them for providing you, our audience, with useful information. However, the advice our guests provide is theirs, and we encourage you to seek out a professional if you have specific questions about any topic we cover on the Crushing Debt podcast. On this week's episode of the podcast, Legacy Cash Flow.
Welcome to the Crushing Debt Podcast with your host, Florida attorney Sean Yesner, where our goal is to help you get rid of the financial bullies in your life.
So welcome back to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. My name is Sean Yesner, owner and founder of Yesner Law and host of the Crushing Debt Podcast. And I have a guest. I am excited to bring to you my guest. I think I'm going to learn a lot, which hopefully means you all learn a lot. Before we get to the guest, though, I do want to say thank you to our longtime sponsor, Sam Cohen. He's with Attorneys First Insurance. For those of you that are first-time listeners, what Sam does is he provides errors and omissions insurance to attorneys and title companies all over the country. Now, he's based here in Florida. He likes talking to title companies and attorneys here in Florida. He's also got a focus on Texas, but he can write errors and omissions policies pretty much anywhere in the state. So if you have a question, if you are a new attorney starting your own firm, if you're just starting up a title company, or if it's getting close to time for your E&O or your malpractice coverage to renew, you can reach Sam at his website, which is attorneysfirst.com, or you can reach him at sam@attorneysfirst.com. And a great way to support the show would be to support our sponsor, Sam. But I am excited to get to our guest today. So our guest is the CEO of Erbe Wealth and a legacy cash flow specialist, which is what I really want to talk to her about. She's also a capital raiser, syndicator, and a real estate investor. She's been a financial educator for 15 years. Her passion is teaching people to unlearn what most of us have been wired to think about money and re-educating people on attaining wealth that can be passed on to the next generation. Welcome my guest this week, Stephanie Walter. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thanks so much for having me.
So I want to sort of right off the bat, what intrigued me is this concept of legacy cash flow. So what do you mean by legacy cash flow?
It's a way that I noticed that a lot of wealthy investors who I raise money for syndicated real estate deals, that they really look at their money very differently than the rest of us. They're looking at their money to be sure that it is providing a cash flow to them. And that's very different than I think most people look at money, which is just, we're going to accumulate that money and then we're going to get it to be a nest egg. And then at the end, we're going to, take the money when we're ready to retire in 30 years or so. Whereas a wealthy person is thinking about their money cash flowing and working for them right now. And not waiting for the benefits of that cash flow. And when you can get good cash flow coming in, you have so much freedom to do anything else. And that really can be a legacy of, having money that's coming into you, but it also can be a legacy of showing your kids that, you're not tied to, the golden handcuffs to your a particular profession, and that you're able to, if you have enough cash flow, able to do things that you're really passionate about and you love.
Got it. It's that whole concept of your money is making you more money.
Yes.
Which I guess is now where the syndication comes in, the real estate investing, that kind of stuff, right?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I like that. So, one of the things here that I wanted to talk to you about, one of the talking points here is reasons to not put your money in a 401k. But one of the interesting things is that's one of the ways to get your money to work for you is to put it into the 401k and let it invest in the 401k. But you've got some other ideas about that.
The 401k can be a little controversial. The way that I look at it, I'll just put it this way, is that from working with wealthy investors, very few, I noticed when I started looking over their financial summaries and everything, their financial statements, very few had money tied into 401ks or IRAs. Found that, notable, but I didn't really have my finger put on it. I read a book called Killing Sacred Cows. It's by Garrett Gunderson. And in it, he talks a lot about the ways that wealthy people look at money as opposed to the average person. And there's two different ways. The wealthy person looks at their money as the concept is utilization. So they're always using their money. That money is being used to make them money at any and all times. Now, that's very different from the way that most of us look at our money, which is, I call it, and Garrett calls it accumulation theory. And that is, now you can do this in a lot of different ways. I personally was, prior to discovering all of this, I was putting my money into single family homes. And my goal was, well, we'll wait it out until these are paid off, and then for 30 years, and then I'll start cash flowing. But while the equity was just sitting in these properties, it wasn't doing anything for me. And I certainly wasn't cash flowing very much. I would say the same thing with a 401k. Basically, the decisions and the investments, most people, if you ask them what their 401k is invested in, they wouldn't be able to tell you what it's invested in. They wouldn't be able to tell you how much their investment made for them in the last year. They won't be able to tell you how many fees they're charged every year on their money, or, regardless of if they make money or lose money, there are fees that are paid. But the largest unknown on the 401k is that big tax bill that's going to come when they start to take that money out of it. So I'm not, an advocate of doing it all one way or another, but I definitely believe in taking more control. And if you do have a 401k, you can roll that over into a self-directed IRA. And in that way, you're able to do this type of investing within your retirement account. But I do think, the hands-off approach of putting your money in a 401k and waiting 30 years, that's not the way that it will get you where you need to be.
Yeah, that basically the set it and forget it mentality. You don't want to, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, you want to, even if you're going to put it in the 401k and use that as the tool to grow everything, you still want to know what's in there, what's being bought, what's being sold, what's the composition, what's the makeup. So I get it. I think I understand now. I wanted to talk about, in your bio, it says you sold your insurance agency of 16 years by following the key principles you teach professionals to use. So now, in addition to raising capital, in addition to the real estate investing, in addition to being the syndicator, you're a financial educator. So how do you transition from insurance to raising capital, syndicating, financial education? What is that, or is that why you made the transition? Is that what caused the transition?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been an entrepreneur. I very late in life was invited to this boot camp that talked about a syndication, which is essentially a group of people buying a piece of real estate that's larger than anyone could do on their own. And when I heard that concept, I was blown away. I loved it. I was sold. I loved the concept. So from that point on, I really just kind of went into this, did my first syndication, and then started realizing that raising money was really where I fit in this area. And I work with a lot of older white men and I love them all, but it frustrated me a lot to get this message. I felt like this message of investing to get cash flow and amazing tax benefits is an important one to get out to people. Even if you look at most people's asset allocation, there really should be a certain percent, 10 to 30% should be in real estate. And that shouldn't be in real estate that your house is in, it should be in. And I think syndication real estate is the best way to do that and still work a job and still get a regular cash check. So that's how I became more of a financial educator, because I was able to sell my agency by transitioning my assets where they were into cash flowing, tax saving assets. And so I love getting this message out, because so many people don't know about it, and the freedom that it gives you when you have cash flow every month is just, you can pursue what you love. And I have an 8-year-old son, and I think it makes me a lot more better mom to do something that I love every day.
Not only that, but now setting up for when it comes time to leave, like you said, to the next generation, setting up him to be successful. I've got a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old as well, and so that resonates a lot with me, is not only making sure that I can provide for my family now while I'm working, but provide for them when I'm gone, although that sort of starts to get into the life insurance discussion
well, I
too.
mean, my husband and I just set up a trust. It's a neat thing. I'm sorry it's taken me so long to do that, but the way that we've set it up is so amazing. And like the guy said, the money that we're rolling into the trust, when we would both pass away, is something that, if managed correctly, can go forever to the kids, to be responsible for. So yes, I hope that's the name of my company, is Erbe, is the German word for legacy. And I took that name because my dad, who was an entrepreneur and kind of my biggest teacher in life, who passed away about 16 years ago, I wanted to give a nod to him. And he was a second generation German immigrant. His father came over. So wanted to give him a nod, but that's something I believe really strongly in, is having a legacy,
right,
for your kids.
Well, and that's, so let me take a pause here to give out your information. So if people want to email you, and again, for those that are listening, I'll put all this in the notes so you can find all this there. But for people that want to connect with you, it's SKW, which I assume are your initials.
Yep.
At Erbe Wealth. Now, Erbe is spelled ERBE Wealth, WEALTH.com. Or visit the website, which is, again, Erbe Wealth, ERBEwealth.com. They can find you on LinkedIn under Stephanie Walter. They can find you on Facebook under Erbe Wealth. And again, I'll put all those social media links and whatnot in the notes if people want to contact you, connect with you, whatever. They can do that. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you real quick, I have a lot of investors that do syndications. I can't put the investment aspect of the syndication together, but I've been able to help with the real estate aspects of the syndication. But when you talk about syndication, like you said, pooling money to buy a property that someone alone may not have the money or the wherewithal to buy themselves, and that's typically used for bigger commercial projects. Do you still have the single family homes? Do you still invest in single family homes or duplexes or triplexes or stuff like that? Or is it strictly just the syndications now?
Yep, it's all syndications. I became real tired. I'd been a landlord. I started investing in those properties about 15, 16 years ago. And I became the fatigued landlord and tired of it. And what I notice is when someone invests in a syndication, which, the professionals are running the day-to-day aspects of the property, they send you reports and money every month for the cash flow, but you don't have to do anything. Once I started investing in those, I was like, this is much better for me. I don't have to worry about that call in the middle of the night. Don't have to worry about, missed rent, or the cat ate the rent or whatever.
Right.
And so that is just a real hands-off approach. And it really is what the wealthy people do, which is be sure that team has a lot of experience and knows what they're doing. And then they hand the money off, and then they'll watch it, definitely, but they believe in investing in business plans and ideas, and that's a little different than what we do.
Right. Isn't the threshold investment for a syndication, in other words, if I wanted to give you some money towards a syndication you're working on, isn't the investment threshold at a certain level? In other words, I couldn't give you $50 and say, hey, here's my syndication buy-in. It would have to be something a little bit more substantial than that, right?
Yeah, for sure. It varies given the project, but I think to say $50,000 to $100,000 is a safe investment. But I'm in my 11th deal, or we'll just be rolling out our 12th deal. And they're almost all of them are in Florida. We've been returning over 20% a year. So if we hold on to the property for 3 to 5 years, we're looking to double the person's investment during that whole time.
So where are you located?
I'm actually located in Colorado. So,
okay.
But my partner, he's 35 years of commercial broker here in Florida. And so we have all the contacts, and I mean, what's not to love about Florida? It's been a great market.
Yeah,
so.
it's a great market. So you're mostly, I guess, commercial. So that's what,
Yep.
office buildings, apartment buildings.
We do mostly value add commercial multifamily, which is an apartment complex. Like, good example is one we bought a couple months ago, was 160 units in Tallahassee, and it had been owned by some people that were living in Canada. And believe it or not, it's very hard to manage 160 units from Canada. So they were just sort of over it and just tired and wanted to get out of it. So
Nice.
That was a great acquisition for us.
Well, I went to school in Tallahassee. I went to undergrad in Tallahassee. So
Oh, nice.
I'm never going to badmouth Tallahassee.
No, we have 4 of our properties in Tallahassee, so we obviously love it there.
Yeah, nice. So sort of getting back to the concept of financial education and some of the other stuff I really wanted to talk to you about here is unlearning what most of us have been wired to think about money, re-educating on attaining wealth. So what are some money myths that you can help us debunk?
The first one is just kind of what we're taught as society of how to save for retirement. That I think largely we tend to put our money in the hands of other people, and we don't understand, what it's doing. We don't understand the fees that are being charged. But like I mentioned before, wealthy people tend to, invest directly in businesses, in real estate, in things like that. Whereas if you think about it, when we invest in a mutual fund, which is, I don't know, thousands of different companies, hundreds or thousands of different companies, would the person that's investing in those know, who's running the company, what their business plan is, anything like that? Probably not. And I think that's not a small thing to notice when you look at an asset allocation of someone that has a lot of money, that they are investing in teams of people that have a business plan together and have an exit strategy. And they're also very concerned with having cash flow in every investment that they do. But larger than that is just the tax. They're very concerned with what they're doing to mitigate their taxes at the end of their investment. So those are, I think the big things. The myth that you put all your money in and you're going to be able to live on that money, when you're ready to retire at 65. But I think just what I've learned is just to be much more proactive about what's happening with your money. And even if you're content to keep your money all in the stock market, which is, we don't know what's going to happen, to consider taking a chunk out of that, either in a self-directed IRA, and do something that is not tied to the market. Real estate largely is not tied to the market, and it's inflation. I heard some crazy numbers today about inflation, and to invest in multifamily properties, that's something that is very recession resistant and inflation. It's a great inflation hedge because as costs go up, rents are going to go up. So investing in tangible assets that hold value through inflationary times is probably what most people would say is a good idea.
Yeah.
As we head into these either transitory or permanent inflation times.
I was going to say, I'm curious to hear what you heard about inflation. I mean, my personal opinion, inflation ain't coming. Inflation is here. We're looking at the results of inflation right now. And I don't think especially here in Florida, I call it a bubble because I don't know that there's a better word for it. There's definitely some kind of real estate correction coming. I don't think it's going to be the bubble that we had in 2008, 9, 10, where the market just crashed. But I do think prices are going up a little bit faster than they should. Here in Florida, I think there's a little bit too much demand that's driving prices up. And then when you layer inflation on top of that, and then you layer on top of that, the Fed is raising interest rates. I think the market, the real estate market especially, could dip a little bit. But I think the mistake that a lot of us made in that 2008 to 2013, 14 timeframe is the panic and the sell-off and that kind of stuff. I think properties are probably going to hold their values a lot better than they did back then. But I'm curious your thoughts on inflation.
Yeah, I think, inflation is here, and it's there's no signs that I think it's going to go away. It's definitely not transitory. So yes, I think it's going to continue for the foreseeable future. It's hard because I get asked this question all the time. And what I say is that, with what we invest in is different than single family. We're investing in, basically it's a business when you invest in an apartment complex, but there's a housing shortage that, is pretty well documented. About 4.5 million, we're short 4.5 million homes for people. And there's a huge demand in Florida just for the mass migration. I don't know. There's different numbers I hear every day of how many people are moving. But I mean, for Tallahassee, just to single that out, that in the next 10 years is expected to double Tallahassee. And so just the mass of people coming in there just simply isn't the housing. So I feel like there can't be something that happens. Like rent is definitely not going to go down. So the values of these commercial multifamily places will not go down because it's their values is based on the income that they receive. Now, a single family home, if same thing that happened in 07, 08, 09, which I don't know will happen again. But when that crash occurred, the value of your house was based on what the comparable value is of your neighbor's house down the street. And so that's kind of how those numbers kind of, really went down. I think it's just important to be looking at recession resistant assets. But Florida, man, it's I don't know, because there's, like I said, just such an influx of people and such a shortage still of housing. So I think it is a unique window of time to invest in and do well right now.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people moving into Florida, which again makes Florida more attractive for investors and syndicators. And the thing I like about Tallahassee, and the reason I think Tallahassee would be a good pick, as well as Gainesville, as well as the other college towns, the interesting thing about Tallahassee is that it's a college town and it's the capital of the state, but that's really the only two things that it's got going on. Is, when college is in session, there's a bunch of people there, a bunch of people need housing, new freshmen are coming in, seniors are graduating, all that kind of stuff. And then when the legislature's in session, there's a ton of activity in that town. But when legislature's out of session, when college isn't in session, there's not that much to do. But again, because of those events, it brings a lot of people into town. It brings people into town on a regular basis. There's a constant turnover of, 4 years ago, the freshmen from 4 years ago are becoming seniors and moving out, and new freshmen are coming in. So there's that constant turnover of potential tenants, the constant turnover of legislators, because legislators may not get voted in for the following term or whatever. So there's constantly legislators coming and going as well. And so I think that's one of the things that makes a lot of those towns, the Tallahassees, the Gainesvilles, those kinds of places, really good for real estate investing. But as we sort of get to the end here, is there anything that I didn't ask you, anything you wanted to add?
No, I mean, nothing that I can think of. I think we covered it.
Okay, good. Well, again, for those people that want your contact information, it's SKW at Erbe Wealth, which is ERBE wealth.com, or that's also the website, which is erbewealth.com. Before I wrap it up real quick, I do have another sponsor that I want to talk about, and it's somebody that's been with the program since day one, episode one. It's our editor, Mark Purvis. Now, what he wanted me to mention real quick is a new website that he's developed called LegacySpotlight.com. Mark is a video editor, producer, and Emmy Award-winning videographer with over 23 years in the marketing and advertising experience. What LegacySpotlight.com is working with families to help seniors record their life stories using fun and creative storytelling techniques. It's a way to preserve the older generation's stories for the younger generations. It's a way to preserve that lifetime of wisdom and stories. And so you can check out Mark's new project at LegacySpotlight.com, which actually fits really well with the legacy cash flow and the other things that Stephanie and I talked about today, that legacy, that leaving things for the next generation, setting up the next generation for success, setting up yourself for success so you can be that generation maybe that's recording for the other generations. Again, thank you to Mark. Thank you to our editor. Check out LegacySpotlight.com. Also check out Sam Cohen at AttorneysFirst.com. Also check out Stephanie at ErbeWealth.com. And I think that's all that I have for this week's episode. So thank you again, Stephanie. I really enjoyed the conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I think that'll do it for this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. Like I say at the end of every episode, I hope that at the end of the month you have more money rather than at the end of the money you have more month. That'll do it for this week's episode, and we look forward to talking to you in next week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast.
If you have questions that you think would make a great topic for a future episode, please email Sean or connect with us on social media. Sean Yesner and Yesner Law, PL, are Florida licensed attorneys. The information contained in this week's episode is not a substitute for legal advice. Your situation may differ, especially if you are located somewhere other than the state of Florida. If you have questions, please contact our office or contact a local attorney. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast.